In 2025, Ford Motor Company has found itself in the kind of spotlight every automaker fears. What began as a series of scattered mechanical problems has snowballed into one of the most serious quality and safety crises in modern automotive history. Steering columns detaching at highway speeds, malfunctioning seatbelts, blank backup cameras, and even do not drive notices affecting millions of vehicles. The list keeps growing. As of late 2025, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration confirms that Ford has issued more than 100 safety recalls this year alone, affecting millions of cars and trucks. The total count eclipses that of any other major automaker and has drawn a record $165 million federal fine for recall reporting failures, the second largest penalty ever issued by the NHTSA. Industry analysts say Ford is now responsible for a majority of all vehicle recalls in the United States this year, a staggering reversal for a brand once synonymous with American reliability. But beyond the headlines lies a deeper story. This isn't just about defective parts or a bad production run. It's about the long-term decisions that eroded Ford's manufacturing discipline, its financial resilience, and ultimately, its credibility with customers and investors. Behind every recall notice sits a chain of causes: cost-cutting measures, supplier strain, and rushed production schedules, driven by competitive pressure in the electric vehicle race. This investigation traces that chain from the factory floor to the dealership showroom, unpacking how the world's most famous truck brand, and a company that once symbolized industrial America, reached this crisis point. Each recall, each regulatory fine, and each frustrated customer tells a small part of the same story: a legacy company caught between tradition, transformation, and turmoil. Real quick, if you're into videos that cut through the noise and break things down clearly, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people find this. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Also, drop a comment and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your take. Now onto the video. When the first steering column recall hit headlines in early October 2025, it seemed like a routine announcement. Recalls, after all, are part of modern auto manufacturing. But as the months unfolded, the figures told a much grimmer story. Ford had logged over 117 distinct recall campaigns by the start of the fourth quarter, a rate that works out to nearly one major recall every 2.5 days. No other automaker came close. According to official NHTSA data, Ford's recall total exceeded 10 million vehicles for the year, outstripping the combined tally of several competitors, including Toyota, Honda, and General Motors. That means roughly 1 out of every 5 vehicles recalled in America this year bore a Ford badge. The most alarming part is not just the volume but the nature of the defects. More than 80% were rated medium to high risk, involving systems critical to vehicle control and occupant safety. The recall wave has affected everything from entry-level sedans to the flagship F-Series trucks. Some of the most prominent cases include steering columns that can separate while driving, seatbelt pretensioners that fail to lock during crashes, and electronic cameras that intermittently shut off, an issue Ford has recalled 3 times since 2022. Many of these defects trace back to suppliers, but Ford's internal oversight failures magnified the damage. Each time the company claimed to have identified a permanent fix, the same fault reappeared months later under a new campaign number. Industry analysts point out that mass recalls on this scale are not just safety concerns, they're financial red flags. Every defective part means warranty claims, dealer labor, and customer compensation. By mid-year, Ford's warranty expenses had already climbed to record levels, and the cost of recall repairs alone was estimated to exceed $800 million. For the NHTSA, the breaking point came when Ford repeatedly delayed required safety notifications, leading to the $165 million fine that would mark a historic low in Ford's relationship with US regulators. What began as an engineering problem has now become a credibility crisis, one that threatens to define Ford's entire decade. For decades, Ford enjoyed a cooperative, if occasionally tense, relationship with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. That changed in 2025. After months of investigation, NHTSA concluded that Ford had repeatedly failed to file required safety defect reports on time and had delayed notifying both dealers and owners about known hazards. The agency's response was decisive. A US $165 million civil penalty, the second largest in its 54-year history. Only Takata's deadly airbag case had drawn a higher fine. To the public, the figure sounded like a one-time punishment. Inside the industry, it meant something larger. A formal declaration that one of America's oldest car makers had lost regulators' confidence. The NHTSA's statement was blunt. Ford's repeated failure to comply with recall requirements and delays in providing critical safety information represent a serious threat to public safety. That language is rare. It signals that officials believe non-compliance was systemic, not accidental. It also opens the door to closer federal monitoring of Ford's recall process for years to come. The fine itself is only part of the cost. Each consent order forces the company to overhaul its reporting systems, retrain staff, and accept external audits. Those obligations stretch resources that were already strained by the recall wave. Every hour spent producing compliance documentation is an hour not spent solving engineering issues. Dealers describe a paper trail thicker than ever. Every steering column shipment, every camera replacement, every seatbelt kit logged and reported. Ford's bureaucracy, already heavy, is groaning under the weight. Wall Street read the NHTSA action as a warning flare. Analysts noted that regulatory penalties rarely appear in isolation. They often precede deeper financial stress. The last time Ford faced similar scrutiny was 2008, on the eve of the global financial crisis. Then, the company narrowly avoided bankruptcy. Now investors fear that mounting recall costs, litigation exposure, and compliance spending could once again push cash flow below critical thresholds. By late October, Ford's shares had fallen more than 30% year-to-date, and ratings agencies began hinting at a possible downgrade. Beyond numbers, the fine also hits reputation, the intangible asset automakers trade on. When the US government publicly accuses a company of endangering drivers, consumer trust erodes overnight. For Ford, that means fewer showroom visits, weaker brand loyalty, and rising skepticism among fleet buyers who depend on reliability above all else. The $165 million was not just a penalty, it was a public verdict on Ford's credibility. The safety headlines draw attention, but the real damage runs through Ford's balance sheet. Every recall is a cost multiplier. New parts, dealer labor, reimbursements, loaner vehicles, customer compensation, and the administrative overhead of coordinating millions of repairs. According to industry estimates, Ford's warranty and recall expenses in 2025 will exceed US $7.8 billion, nearly double its total net profit from the previous year. That imbalance has forced the company to divert cash from research, development, and future model programs just to plug the hole. Internally, executives face a vicious cycle. Quality problems lead to recalls. Recalls drain capital. Cost-cutting to restore profit leads to weaker oversight, which in turn produces more quality problems. It's the same downward spiral that crippled several Detroit automakers in the late 2000s. Analysts at Moody's and C&P Global now warn that if Ford's quarterly free cash flow falls below roughly $3 billion, a threshold tailored to its debt load, its credit rating could slip from investment grade to junk status. Ford carries more than $140 billion in total debt. Even a 1 percentage point increase in average interest rates would add roughly $1.4 billion a year in financing costs. Investors have noticed. By mid-autumn, major institutions such as BlackRock and Vanguard had trimmed their Ford holdings, citing heightened operational and regulatory risk. The company's market capitalization dropped by roughly a third in less than 10 months, erasing tens of billions in shareholder value. Meanwhile, legal liabilities continue to mount. Class action suits alleging concealment of safety defects now stretch across multiple states, with combined settlement estimates exceeding $2 billion. Add another $400 million in dealer compensation claims for unsellable inventory, and the math turns grim fast. The broader economic environment compounds the pain. Higher interest rates make borrowing for factory retooling or electric vehicle expansion more expensive. Consumers, facing tighter credit, delay big-ticket purchases, especially trucks that can top $70,000. Fleet buyers seek alternative suppliers to minimize downtime. In short, every segment of Ford's business model feels pressure at once. Inside the company, leadership insists that restructuring plans and a renewed quality-first program will stabilize operations. The skeptics point out that similar pledges followed previous crises with little measurable improvement, until Ford demonstrates that it can produce vehicles free from major defects, and do so profitably. The markets are likely to remain unconvinced. The financial story and the safety story are now the same. One drives the other, and both are headed in a dangerous direction. If Ford's headquarters is the command center of the crisis, its dealerships are the front lines, where the consequences of corporate decisions meet real customers. Across the United States, dealership service bays are clogged with trucks and SUVs awaiting recall repairs, many of them under do not drive warnings. For these local businesses, the issue isn't abstract. It's unsellable inventory, mounting interest payments, and angry customers who once trusted the Ford badge without question. In interviews with regional dealer associations, frustration runs deep. One veteran dealer in Ohio described having more than 80 vehicles sitting idle on his lot, all affected by active recalls for steering or braking components. "We can't legally sell them," he said. "They're just parked there, costing us money every single day." Floor plan financing, essentially loans used by dealers to purchase inventory, still accrues interest, even when vehicles can't move. Multiply that across hundreds of dealerships, and millions of dollars in monthly carrying costs evaporate into thin air. The service departments, usually reliable profit centers, are also overwhelmed. Warranty work pays less than regular maintenance or repair jobs, and many dealerships report losing $30,000 to $40,000 per month in potential revenue because recall repairs dominate their schedules. Loyal customers, tired of waiting months for appointments, turn to independent mechanics for routine maintenance, but defection weakens the long-term customer relationship. One of the few stable profit channels dealerships have left. Compounding the tension is Ford's corporate response. Dealers claim the company provides limited communication and minimal compensation for recall-related downtime. In some cases, they receive parts only in small batches, forcing triage decisions over which customer's vehicle gets repaired first. Meanwhile, corporate memos warn dealers against publicly criticizing Ford's quality problems, threatening reduced allocations or even franchise review for reputational harm. For multi-generational family dealerships, the pressure is unprecedented. Dealers who once considered Ford a lifelong partnership now quietly explore alternatives, adding rival brands or considering a full switch. It's a chilling indicator of loyalty erosion at the core of Ford's distribution network. When the people selling your vehicles stop believing in your product, recovery becomes far more than an engineering challenge. It becomes a trust crisis rooted in the very system meant to sustain you. For millions of Ford owners, the recall crisis isn't a line item in a corporate report, it's a daily disruption. Imagine paying $1,200 a month for a truck you can't legally drive. That's the reality for customers like Mike from Texas, who purchased a 2024 F-150 Super Duty King Ranch for nearly $80,000. If within months, he received a do not drive notice over the steering column. His dealer told him parts were backordered for up to 8 months. The truck now sits immobilized in his driveway, payments still due, resale value plummeting. Stories like Mike's have become common across online forums and complaint boards. Owners of Ford's most popular models, F-150’s, Mustangs, Explorers, share similar frustrations. Endless wait times, poor communication, and little to no compensation. Many say Ford offers no courtesy vehicles, no loaners, and no reimbursement for alternative transportation. A few have joined class action lawsuits, alleging negligence and deceptive practices, arguing that the company knew of the defects long before recalls were issued. The emotional toll is visible in interviews and social media posts. For working-class Americans who rely on their trucks for business, each day without their vehicle means lost income. Contractors, delivery drivers, and small business owners face an impossible choice: risk driving a potentially unsafe vehicle or risk financial ruin. Even loyal Ford fans, the ones who proudly display decades-old badges on their pickup grilles, are starting to voice doubt about the company's direction. Many call this the first time I've ever regretted buying a Ford. Ford's customer service lines are reportedly inundated, but response times lag. Dealerships say they're understaffed and underinformed, often learning about new recalls from public press releases rather than corporate briefings. This communication breakdown deepens resentment. turning brand advocates into critics. What makes the situation particularly damaging is the scale of betrayal. Ford's marketing has always positioned its vehicles as dependable companions, built Ford tough. Yet that slogan now rings hollow for those whose trucks are parked indefinitely. The company isn't just fighting lawsuits, it's fighting the erosion of faith among everyday Americans who once viewed the Ford logo as a promise of durability. Rebuilding that trust will take more than press statements. It will require evidence that Ford truly values the people who built its reputation from the ground up. To understand how Ford arrived at this point, it's necessary to trace the decisions made long before the 2025 recall avalanche. Beginning in 2019, Ford undertook a sweeping cost-cutting initiative aimed at boosting margins and funding its electric vehicle transition. Thousands of experienced U.S. manufacturing workers, many with 20 or 30 years on the line, were laid off as production shifted to Mexico, Brazil, and other lower-cost regions. The strategy seemed efficient on paper. In practice, it hollowed out the institutional knowledge that once defined Ford's build quality. Insiders describe a culture shift, where older engineers once insisted on multi-phase testing and strict supplier audits, new management prioritized speed and quarterly savings. Ford's own former vice president of manufacturing told Bloomberg that quality control departments were gutted to reduce expenses and product testing cycles were cut in half. In the short term, the company saved millions. In the long term, it sacrificed reliability, the foundation of its brand. The next domino fell in the supplier network. Ford, like most modern automakers, relies on hundreds of external vendors for everything from electronics to transmissions. When Ford began squeezing supplier margins and delaying payments to preserve cash, the best suppliers quietly exited. Those who stayed often cut corners to meet Ford's aggressive cost targets. Oversight weakened dramatically. According to leaked internal memos, the number of Ford engineers stationed at supplier plants fell from 200 to just 47, a 76% reduction in on-site quality control. The result was predictable. Defective steering components, malfunctioning cameras, and unreliable sensors flowed unchecked into production lines. By the time the vehicles reached dealerships, the damage was already built in. Each successive recall traces back to a simple principle: you can't outsource accountability. Industry veterans see echoes of the infamous Ford Pinto scandal of the 1970s, when cost-benefit calculations weighed lawsuit settlements against safety fixes. The idea of acceptable risk, once considered a dark relic of corporate history, seems to have resurfaced in modern form. Ford's internal cost analyses allegedly favored financial containment over proactive recalls on several defects flagged by engineers. Saving millions today may have cost billions tomorrow. Now Ford faces not just a technical crisis, but a philosophical one. How do you restore a culture of craftsmanship after years of treating quality as expendable? Until the company confronts that question, every new vehicle that rolls off the line carries the shadow of the shortcuts that came before. Even as Ford's traditional truck and SUV lineup face mounting recalls, the company's leadership pinned its long-term hopes on electrification. The strategy was bold: compete head-to-head with Tesla and a rising wave of Chinese EV manufacturers by rapidly scaling production of the F-150 Lightning and Mustang Mach-E. Billions were poured into new battery facilities, software development, and factory conversions. But ambition met reality faster than the batteries could charge. By 2025, Ford's electric vehicle division had accumulated more than $12 billion in losses over 3 years, with another $5 to $5.5 billion projected for the current fiscal year. Early production hurdles turned into chronic reliability issues. The Lightning faced 3 major recalls related to battery pack malfunctions and charging system faults. The Mach-E, meanwhile, suffered 5 separate recalls ranging from software glitches that disabled propulsion to door latch failures that trapped occupants inside. Each incident chipped away at the very narrative Ford hoped to build, that it could marry legacy craftsmanship with cutting-edge innovation. The rush to electrify also diverted funds from quality assurance on traditional models. Analysts note that between 2021 and 2024, Ford's R&D budget shifted heavily toward EV development, while internal combustion platforms saw budget cuts of up to 30%. Engineers familiar with long-standing truck programs were reassigned or let go, leaving gaps in oversight that coincided with the recent wave of mechanical recalls. In trying to build the future, Ford neglected the present. There's also the market problem. EV adoption in North America plateaued in 2025 as high interest rates, charging infrastructure gaps, and consumer hesitation slowed growth. Inventory of unsold Lightnings piled up at dealers, even before the recalls. To move units, Ford resorted to steep discounts, further bleeding cash. The result is a paradox. The company is losing money on every electric vehicle sold, while its gasoline models, once the profit engine, are mired in quality crises. Ford's electrification gamble was meant to secure its relevance for the next decade. Instead, it exposed just how fragile that relevance had become. The company now finds itself stretched between two faltering worlds: an old business it can't fix fast enough, and a new one it can't yet afford to win. Automakers live or die by the strength of their suppliers. Ford's recall tsunami revealed how fragile that ecosystem can become when financial strain meets mistrust. Over the last 5 years, Ford's cost reduction campaigns placed extraordinary pressure on its global supplier base, extending payment cycles, demanding price cuts, and shifting production responsibilities without the supporting audits that once guaranteed consistency. Suppliers quietly began to rebel. Tier 1 component makers like Bosch, ZF, and Magna, who once staffed on-site engineers inside Ford plants, scaled back cooperation or renegotiated contracts on tougher terms. Smaller vendors, dependent on Ford's volume, accepted the harsh conditions but cut their own costs to survive. The consequence: thinner margins, cheaper materials, and rushed timelines. When these compromises collided, the defects multiplied. Former Ford quality engineers describe how the loss of veteran supplier liaisons crippled communication. Issues that might once have been flagged during pre-production testing now surfaced only after vehicles reached customers. By then, recall costs dwarfed whatever savings Ford had achieved. Analysts estimate that 82% of Ford's 2025 recalls involved supplier-made components. In other words, nearly every headline defect originated outside Ford's direct control. But inside its sphere of responsibility, effects ripple far beyond Detroit. Because Ford operates globally, its supplier woes touch thousands of jobs from Ontario to Sao Paulo. When Ford slows production, upstream contractors cut shifts or shutter lines, economists warn that prolonged instability could echo through entire regional manufacturing corridors. The United States, still eager to reshore industrial capability, can ill afford another symbolic failure from one of its foundational manufacturers. International competitors have seized the moment. Toyota, Hyundai, and Volkswagen have intensified campaigns emphasizing reliability and consistency. Chinese automakers, sensing weakness, are pushing aggressively into markets Ford once dominated, advertising their vehicles as tested, proven, and recall-free. In trade shows and press briefings, Ford's troubles have become a cautionary tale of what happens when financial engineering overtakes mechanical engineering. If there's a lesson here, it's that trust in a brand is built through every nut, bolt, and handshake along its supply chain. Once suppliers lose faith that their partner values quality over short-term savings, the entire machine falters. Ford's challenge now is not merely technical, it's relational. It must convince hundreds of partners worldwide that the old culture of pride in craftsmanship can still be revived before those partnerships vanish entirely. The story of Ford in 2025 reads less like a temporary stumble and more like a mirror held up to the modern industrial age. Here is a company that once defined American ingenuity, now wrestling with the consequences of speed, scale, and short-sightedness. The data tell a sobering tale: more than 100 recalls in a single year, billions lost to warranty claims, and a trust deficit stretching from regulators to customers. Yet within that crisis lies a final question. Can legacy still mean something in an era obsessed with disruption? Rebuilding won't be easy. To restore credibility, Ford must reverse years of erosion in its manufacturing discipline and corporate transparency. That means reinstating robust quality control, empowering engineers over accountants, and repairing strained dealer and supplier relationships. It also means confronting the culture of denial that allowed warning signs to fester until they became national headlines. A company's future may depend less on the next electric truck than on whether drivers believe the one they own today will start, steer, and stop as promised. For the American auto industry, Ford's reckoning is a warning shot. Innovation without reliability, expansion without accountability, and growth without integrity lead inevitably to collapse. But history also reminds us that the same company once reinvented mass production, helped mobilize the Allies in World War II, and survived the Great Recession without a bailout. The blueprint for redemption exists, if leadership has the courage to follow it. As the recall repairs continue, and analysts debate Ford's financial survival, one truth remains clear. Trust, once broken, is the hardest component to replace. The company that built America's best-selling truck now faces the most important rebuild of all, its own reputation. Once again, thanks for watching this video. If you got something out of this, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. And hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Agree, disagree, or something in between. I'd love to hear it.